In the next couple videos, our goal is to add a new type of enemy sprite. This is going to be an enemy probe that moves around the screen and fires energy particles at you. We also want to have levels so that the probes behave differently as you destroy them. Remember that we're using the player sprite to hold information about the game. Right now, it's holding the score and the lives, and we're going to add the game level to this. Anytime we want information about the player's progress in the game, we're going to want to tie that back to the player sprite. We also want to be intentional about how we use sprite groups. We want to think about what each sprite group does and how different groups interact with each other. Most sprites will be placed into multiple groups because we want multiple things to happen. One nice aspect of sprite groups is that when a sprite is killed, it is removed from all the groups automatically. This means we don't have to go group by group to get rid of them. We're going to take a moment and look at the reorganization of the sprite groups so that we can get these desired behaviors. The first group is the All Sprites group. This is the catch-all for all the sprites that will need to be drawn and updated. The next two groups are the Lasers and Enemies group. These are how we're going to check for interactions. When the lasers hit the enemies, it will cause an explosion. And when the enemies hit the player sprite, the shields will decrease and maybe the player will blow up. The last two groups are specifically for the asteroids and the probes. These groups will help us keep track of the number of those objects that are in the game at any given time. For the asteroids, we have a piece of code that will keep spawning new ones so that there's a constant number at all times. For the probes, we're going to start with a certain number, and when this number gets down to 0, we will go to the next level and spawn a new set of probes. This will lead to a couple other updates, such as changing the code from a laser hitting an asteroid to a laser hitting an enemy. The logic is the same, but we just need to switch out the groups. We will also update the collision to be between enemies and the spaceship. And every time enemies of any type are created, we need to make sure we add them to the enemies group. So with all that in place, let's start thinking about the probes. Each level will consist of a number of probes, and the player goes up to the next level after all the probes are destroyed. Each probe will have a starting position, and then follow a path built on a sequence of points. To make sure that the probes don't overlap, we're going to number them and have slightly different starting positions based on that number. There will be 3 patterns that we will have the probes follow. The first is a zigzag pattern, moving down the screen and then back up again. The second will go diagonally on and off the screen. And the third will be probes that dart around randomly. Controlling the probe movement requires quite a bit of mathematics. We need to calculate how many frames it takes to go from one point to the next, and we need to calculate the new position based on the movement speed. We'll give a high-level overview of this, and if you want to dive into the details of this part of the code, you're certainly welcome to. The idea is that we begin with a starting position and a list of points. We calculate the number of frames needed to get to the first point, and then set a movement timer to let us know that we've arrived. And then we calculate the position along the straight line path from the first point to the second point, and repeat the process. When we get to the very last point, we connect back to the first point in the loop, and the path starts all over again. When it comes to adding new movement patterns, you only need to focus on the sprite movement pattern section. You can see that each pattern has a path that consists of a sequence of points, and also a starting position. The starting position may vary based on the number of probes that there are. And if you wanted to add more patterns, you would simply increase the number of patterns and expand the pattern selecting code. Everything else is automatically taken care of for you. You're encouraged to see what you can do with these movement patterns. The game currently has all the probes following the exact same path, except for the random movement, but you may want to try creating multiple pathways on a single level. We will need to create the probes at the start of the game, and then increase the level when the probes are destroyed. Notice that we've added a max probes parameter, and that we have a loop to create that number of probes. In the main game loop, we have a check to see how many probes remain. If there are 0, then we increase the level, increase the maximum number of probes by 1, and also increase the maximum number of asteroids by 1. This will increase the intensity of the game as the player gets further along. After that, we have another loop that generates the new probes. And now we have enemy probes that move around the screen, and a leveling system to incrementally make the game more difficult. In the next video, we will make it so that these probes fire energy particles directly at the player.